Well, here we go. Here's another strange one, Dezo. I'm going to show you. Started looking at the ATFs. Try and blow you in there a little bit. So, this is xplane 11. They just updated it again. It's actually starting to look pretty good. But to my horror, I got into a Cessna. And over here, this is a completely different version of an ADF I've never seen. You better read there. So that's the ADF number, and this has some type of frequency flipper on it. I am not going to build one of these. I don't know what they are. I really have no idea, but I guess it's a newer version of an older radio, or it covers two radios. Anyway, I'm going to pause this video because I'm not going to get into that, but I'm just showing you that in case you come across it. Alright, I'll pause this. Okay, here we go. I actually had to turn off xplane 11 because I couldn't find proper ADFs to be goofing around with. There's only 3 planes that I really have on it. The older ones don't even have an ADF. I presume that when I jumped over at Ireland, I was going to start this in Ireland, but it shows that we don't really have any towers or that over there, or very few of them that I could find anyway. And the map in xplane 10 only shows you within like a 40-mile radius. I think the whole map is only 100 miles across, something like that. Anywho, I set us up we're in San Francisco here. So, we're at the airport here. Hope you can see this. And this is, I don't know whether you can read these, but that says that's an NDB, which is one of the radio beacons that the ATF picks up, or the ADF picks up. These ones here are vortex, so they have frequency numbers on them, which are picked up by the other type of navigation, which would be the nav radios. You can see that these all have different numbers on them here. Some of these numbers are glide scopes, like the red one that's lit up there. I wrote that one down because it's 10890. So we're actually on the airport somewhere around here. We're going to take off, and I've set in the VOR, or one of the ADFs that's here, and then I sent in another one that's somewhere around here. I think maybe it's Tracy or that. 203. Yeah, it's going to send us, it brings us down here, and then it brings us over to Tracy, and will bring us back in past here. No, we're going to go Tracy here. Confusing myself. That's what it's going to do. It's going to go Tracy, and then we're going to go up to Canaan, which is 355. So they're ADF numbers. So when we jump out of this, I have to put it back in this bad boy. Let me get rid of that. I was just looking up the meaning. In the instructions, you can turn on and it'll tell you what the buttons and the switches do in the instruction area. So on this radio, what we're going to do is we're going to put 203 in here, so as you can see it. And then on this one, ADF1, we're going to put in 355 because that's the second one. Actually, I should put them the other way around, but it's okay. The thing about doing a big build like an RV is that it requires from everyone in the shop. Everything is bigger, and it's not just the car. Now, over here, it's not these ones at all. I was making a mistake. This is actually Navigation 1 and Navigation 2 that it runs on. The ADF readers are here. This one doesn't say it on it, but they're ADF. As you can see, it says there, ADF and VOR here. So if you click on the VOR, that's picking up, that will run the same direction and pick up the same signal and run the same way as this one here will. And this one here on Nav 1. It doesn't really matter. This is the problem where they all become entwined, where with the autopilot and that, and I'm running into trouble. So this one, you can see when it's turned on to the navigation's dead, so there's no signal coming in. So the two of them just sit on top of one another and sideways. But because we just programmed two waypoints in there, that each of these signifies one. This one is ADF1, and the one that's hollow is ADF2. So we have both of them are on there. One of them is not picking something up. We might be behind a mountain or something. But ADF2 is the one that we're going to go out on. It's the first point. So we're just going to, when we get out of the airport, we just set the heading. You can't set anything on them. But you set your flight heading on this one to spin around to, that's going to go out at that airport is at 60, That's 70 degrees. So you would set your heading here at 70 degrees. There you go. It's actually at 70 degrees. So once we would take off, I will just hit the autopilot, and the autopilot will take off that way. We'll actually just take off. This plane is already set. Let's see if I can get this into full screen before we crash. And I'll show you when we get off the ground. I'm not going to bother with flaps or anything, so it might just go to pieces. But what I want to do is show you the needles moving. I didn't put any aids on because it will be a miracle if we get off the ground. But as far as the airspeed in this plane, there we go. Alright, okay, yeah. Very good at that. So I'm going to set the autopilot on so that she'll fly for me. We'll just set it to an altimeter. To you. Slow you down because I'm going to blow my flaps up. Do heading. Because we know that that's going to spin towards the heading because we set the heading here. So what will happen is we're heading towards number 2 now, number 2 ADF that we set, and that number 1 will spin because that's always going to point at where the other roar is. So when we get all the way over to that one, you see that's coming around as the plane is turning. The 2 of these will turn. So that'll come around to pointing towards the front of the plane, which would be here. So that we leave it set at a heading at 70. And you'll see the second one, because we're changing direction and we're getting further away from it, the angle will change on that. When we pass over the beacon itself, that arrow will spin from front to back immediately, so you know that you've gone over that point, and then you would transfer your heading number over to whatever next beacon you want to do, and then you'd follow that line down. So you're pretty much pointing at them. You can also use them to sort of drive by or drive away from them. I'm not going to get into that because there is a way using to use 2 of them to fly in between them. But that's basically what an ADF does. Alrighty.